starting the substantive part of the conference. Dr. Michał Mochocki, who is the adjunct of the University, Kazimierz Wielki University in Bydgoszcz. He is also the part of the Game Research Association of Poland. He co-created RPG game and he popularizes games. He will present to us a lecture called Three Phases of GBL Ideology. We would like to invite you to this lecture, and we start with Dr. Michał Mochocki.
Dzień dobry, witam Państwa serdecznie. Zacznę od
Hello, good morning. Let me start from a traditional question. Can you finally hear me correctly?
Świetnie.
Great.
Przepraszam za odrobinę problemów technicznych.
Apologies for some technical problems. Hopefully this will be the first and the last technical problem we've had. So I would like to invite you for 25 minutes of details of ideology. Well, or ideology was a clickbait a bit about game-based learning. As you can see on the second slide, I will talk about three main aspects that using games in education is divided into. First is obvious, educational games, designed specifically as educational tools. But apart from that first group, we have also entertaining games or the commercial off-the-shelf game that was not intended to be used in education, but still teachers, educators can find some educational benefits from using such games in their classes. Third aspect I will focus on is gamification, or I will be using the Polish or English version. Apologies for that. So after telling you about these three areas, we will see that not all of these three aspects cover perfectly the amount of games we can use, the scope of games we can use, or maybe some of them will be able to be put in in more than one basket only. So I will tell you more about so-called gameful design or so-called playful design, and combining the two ideas. So, point number one: educational games. Where can we get them? Well, there are different actors on the market coming from different industries. First of all, such games are published by big, smaller companies specializing in didactic educational materials, worksheets, scientific supports, and so on. Second area, game producers or toy producers that issue a certain line of educational games or educational toys. The third area is the so-called serious games or applied games or games with a purpose or games for change industry. Names differ, but all these games, all these names have something else than entertainment as a priority. They have a certain goal, like, for example, social change, change of attitudes, change of habits, engaging community into science, citizen science, so-called. It can be a pro-health activity, for example. So among all this broad games all have one thing in common: education is the priority of their target, is their priority goal, and they are published also by NGOs. They are published by some public or private institutions, or they are even an activist projects. And then the fourth point here are educational services. So games are offered as trainings, or they are ordered specifically by a given company, by a given client, corporate clients, for example, or schools. Moving on. I would like to tell you a bit more about pitfalls hidden in all these aspects, in all these groups. So if we take a look at games that are designed by educational companies, the priority there is education, for sure. So this is just to be a teaching aid for the teacher, and this is the priority. So a lot of these games is not written well in terms of gameplay, so they are not really engaging in terms of gameplay, and they're not entertaining. Then, if we move on to games as toys, so the priority here is fun, is enjoyment. So the game might be colorful, might be beautiful. You can play with these elements, but both entertainment and education may be at a lower level. Then moving on to games created by gaming industry. Entertainment is of paramount importance there. So we assume that this will be top aspect. And then the game may not be really educational. And then, if I may direct your attention to the last 2 points, in terms of serious games, then the priority is mission. And if the mission is not educational, but for example pro-social, well, then entertainment and education might not be the top of top quality. However, sometimes these serious games may also have education as a priority. Then it will also be good in this respect. And then the most credible producer, I would say, would be the or educational games industry. So companies that specialize in producing games that are educational. There, the priority would be both entertainment and education, and these games would be the best in terms of the reception. And interestingly, a lot of non-profit organizations is in this group. For example, Filament Games or iCivics.org. You can check out their websites for quite some good examples, in my opinion, how educational game can also work very well, can also provide good entertainment. A very important disclaimer here: please don't think that if a game is produced by a toy company, it will surely be poor in terms of its education aspects. Or conversely, if the game is produced by a gaming industry, then again, education will not be the priority here. These are just risks that I'm enumerating here. That's it in terms of great numbers, the statistics in general. To summarize, I think we can say that educational games have gone through quite an evolution. First, teachers created them, mostly, and they were, they used to have contained quite a lot of material, not a lot of entertainment. using, for example, quiz-based mechanics. So educational games are based on questions, and if we answer correctly, we get points. Solving mathematical exercises as well. So, well, is solving a mathematical equation is an interesting game? Well, I don't think so, but these were only the first examples of games focused on exercises. Then entertaining games appeared, and the games were supposed to be easy and simple, and they were not educational at the same time. Up until recently, we haven't had these games that were both entertaining and educational. Sometimes we try to balance that 50-50, which is not the best solution, I think, because we risk that the game would be lacking in both of these respects. But if we are able to take a look at the game and an educational process as a dynamic system that will have identical mechanics, dynamics, interaction structure, then we can design a system that would work 100% both in educational and entertainment aspects.
But let's move on. The second slide, now the third one. I will tell you about some codes, commercial codes. So commercial off-the-shelves are very popular. It's the use of games for the didactic purposes on commercial market. Does it work? Please look at the report Teaching with Games from 2006, which shows what are the benefits and also disadvantages of this approach. I will underline that commercial games can be taken from the commercial market, so from producers of different games, and from non-commercial productions. So we are looking in the societies, creators of the games, from, for example, game jams, so team marathons of quickly designing the games. Very often after such game jams, many games are published online. Global Game Jam was, I think, the first event of such importance. But how to choose games that will be available for education, that will be useful in education? So I will follow, you should follow guidelines of educators, for example, books. For example, Karolczuk-Zamborowska, let's allow children to play. In English, we have the book Library's Good Game that deal with many different subjects, not only mathematics as the first game, but of course English books are, let's say, adjusted to American curricula. What should game teach? Right? This is the main question. We should choose if the game should focus on transferring knowledge. And I don't think games are the best tool to do so. I think games are better to teach understanding of something, because games will be simulations of processes, in action. And the third area that I think is the most important for us is the learning different skills like counting, diagnostics, negotiations. How? Because games allow us to train these skills via practice. There are different activities, there are different tasks that require the use of such skills. There's another question in terms of education. Maybe we don't want to use games for teaching per se, but for verification of achievements. We will answer to this question by looking at recommendation and experiences of educators who were before us. Well, by the way, I would like to remind you or accentuate that educational games do not necessarily learn themselves. And I think it's a common agreement among educators and researchers that game teaches best if it's well adjusted to the process of teaching. Of course, first we need to prepare teachers to absorb the knowledge and learn abilities. And what is very important that after the game, we will have a special session, like follow-up session, that will conclude the game, because game uses immersion process, right? And then we play, we don't think. So we think that it's very easy to transfer the knowledge from the game to the real life. So it's not so simple. Very often students need the help of the instructor to switch right from the experience, from the game, from the play, to the real world that they live in. And this is a great quote by John Dewey, but I don't think he said it. We don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. So I recommend remembering this quote. And the third area of games in education or of gamification is competition, gaming. And there are many different bottom-up initiatives. They're created by teachers that are fascinated with the method of gamification, and that the teachers actually write their own project or they're inspired by other projects. If you want to follow this path, you have 4 books I recommend. Sheldon, it should be 2011, not 2001. Sorry for the mistake. And we also have a good market of gamification. We can hire companies or consultants. Here I recommend Yukai Cho. I know him personally. He's the leader of gamification, a lot of materials on the website, and very interesting system of gamification that is presented on the website. Of course, he earns money as a consultant, but a lot of material free, actually, website. You can also use ready-made platforms or gamification platforms projects. So if we have time, please open the link, click on the link, and watch on the website Classcraft the film. I don't think we have time now, but you can do it later. So I'm not even paid to recommend you the Classcraft. This is the online system with the different characters, attributes, virtual keys. Everything is set and prepared. What we need to do as educators is to submit our tasks, our tests, or our expectations in terms of interaction between students. This system is beautifully designed, and actually teachers, students have their own avatars. They develop their avatars and they gain additional equipment and attributes, uniforms, and so on and so forth. So for students who are used to video games, this in terms of aesthetics and mechanics works really well, and it's a great solution. Classcraft. Let's stop and talk about the gamification, educational gamification, but I'm waiting for another slide to open. We have the main problem with gamification. On the market, there are many different ideas and solutions that are poor too simple. What is the gamification? I will define you this concept is to redesign or design the process of education, to look the process of education like a game. It means to project or design the system of awards or grades, for example, by giving achievement points, or giving students a virtual currency, or the achievement tree that visualizes students' progress, and students' powers are presented on the tree. It's also about introducing mechanics and dynamics of the game, for example, development of character statistics, or collecting different collections, or trading in games, right? Or some auctions in the game as well. And last but not least, aesthetics and terminology. So we use names of avatars, quest, boss fight, so fight with super powerful opponents. And the anti-example of this is the PBL triad, so points, badges, and leaderboards, because in gamification is based most of all on that. So we take very mundane tasks, we have it at class, and then we give them points, and then we have ranks, and students can compete to get the highest rank. And then we give students badges or medals that can be displayed somewhere. Such systems are quite oppressive because they force students to be they're motivated not intrinsically but externally. And educators actually criticize this approach, and game designers also criticize PBL. So what instead of else? Here we have the idea of designing gamification and games focused on intrinsic motivation. Here you can see the original models of motivating gamers, why the gamers want to play the game, what is the entertainment for them from the website Quantic Foundry. And if we compare it with intrinsic motivation, we will see that it's actually more or less the same. In terms of students' intrinsic motivation, we have action, achievement, immersion, creativity, motivation of students, well, social interaction, mastery, achievement, immersion. So going deep into the fantasy and creativity. Each of these, we have 12 different motivations because each of them has two sides, let's say. And when we design the game in this way, we will promote intrinsic motivation. Another slide, this is a very similar model mentioned by me, Lukai Cho, Octalysis framework, and here we have 8 motivations distributed differently, but we are more or less in the same area of experiences of the players. Here we have elements of the game that actually promote the motivation, intrinsic motivation of students. Lukai Cho wrote even the book, Actionable Game on Gamification. The name of the book was on the previous slide, so I recommend the book as a good tool to design gamification on yourself, by yourself. I will tell you now about playful design, which actually comes from what I've already said, because gamification is not only about getting achievements. Gamification is also about play, entertainment, crafting, working together, creating different objects with elements. Is like satisfying creativity of students. Minecraft is the main example of maybe not a game, but of a platform that is educational in terms of individual construction of the game. we also need playification. So we need to design tasks which are not only focused on winning, but students should actually interact with others and creatively express themselves. And the last two slides, the last minute. And so it's a bit now blurred. Gamification, games, playification, because if we appreciate less important elements like storytelling, like creating different worlds, we also make lessons more like a theater play or more like a game. Each game, if it's not a random game, teaches some skill. So each game can be used. Assassin's Creed, Civilization. Would such games be non-educational? They are some games based on gamification, or they're marketed like games. But if we look inside, it's like the gamification of the Matura exam, like Gram and Zdam, or World Without Oil, the game about saving resources. If we make gamification, design the whole lesson as a gamification, is it the gamification of the lesson? And what about the scale of grading? How should we assess and grade gamification? Of course, there are some games that are clear and that are in the box, right? And with strict frames, but there are other games that cannot be put in one box. I think I need to finish. Sorry, we didn't have time for questions. So, if you have any questions, please ask me on the chat or just write to me an email. And thank you very much. But I will like to invite you to the workshop that will take place at 3 o'clock.